What was one of the biggest challenges you faced during your time in the concentration camps?
My tragic problem during those times was not so much with humanity, with society, with culture, they came later, but only with God. Because I come from a religious, totally religious upbringing. To me it was God. God is good, God is merciful, charitable, and God is with us everywhere. That is the most famous saying in the Zohar, the Book of Splendor. There is no place void of God. And therefore my question was, where is God? Is he here?
You have stated that some believed in the eclipse of God. How did you feel about this?
Some of us felt that to be abandoned by humanity then was not the ultimate. We felt that to be abandoned by God was worse than to be punished by Him. Better an unjust God than an indifferent one. For us to be ignored by God was a harsher punishment than to be a victim of His anger. Man can live far from God, not outside God. God is wherever we are, even in suffering, even in suffering.
Do you believe that anti-Semitism is growing?
Where? In the world, on the planet, as such, or in our country, there we must be very careful, because to level an accusation of anti-Semitism is the most serious accusation I can undertake, and therefore I'm careful. In America, for instance, we have our collective memory, and I'm an American, so I accept it. And we have done terrible things in America, in our history. What we have done to the Native Americans. They didn't invite us. We came, and what we have done to them. What we have done to the black community. I must have told you that because it's with me. When I came to America in 1956, I went on a coast-to-coast trip. Journalist friends gave me a lift. I wanted to know the country. When I came to the South, and I saw racism at work, functioning, I was of course outraged. But then when I saw that it was the law, racists were protected by the law, I felt shame. For the first time in my life, I felt shame. Not for being Jewish. I had never had that shame, in spite of what the enemy had tried to do to us. Never. I felt shame for being white.
Are there other people who are calling for help too?
Others are important to me. Other people, other ideas, other situations, other tragedies matter to me. Believe me that apartheid is, in my view, as abhorrent as anti-Semitism. To me, Andrei Sakharov's isolation is as much of a disgrace as Yosef Biegun's imprisonment and Idan Nudel's exile, as is the denial of solidarity and its leader Lech Wałęsa's right to dissent, and Nelson Mandela's interminable imprisonment. There is so much injustice and suffering crying out for our attention. Victims of hunger, of racism, and political persecution. Certain fascist regimes, like in Chile, or Marxist regime, like in Ethiopia and in other places of the world, where writers and poets are prisoners. And there are so many prisoners in so many lands, by the left, by the extreme left, and by the right, the extreme right. Now, you know, as I do, that human rights are being violated on every continent. More people are oppressed than free. How can one not be sensitive to their plight? Human suffering anywhere concerns men and women everywhere.
When you speak about the Nazis, you seem to do it without hate or resentment. Do you hold none against them, and have you forgiven them?
I regard hatred as bestial and crude, and prefer that my actions and thoughts be the product, as far as possible, of reason. Much less do I accept hatred directed collectively at an ethnic group, for example, at all the Germans. If I accepted it, I would feel that I was following the precepts of Nazism, which was founded precisely on national and racial hatred. I must admit that if I had in front of me one of our persecutors of those days, certain known faces, certain old lies, I would be tempted to hate, and with violence too. But exactly because I am not a fascist or a Nazi, I refuse to give way to this temptation. I believe in reason and discussion as the supreme instruments of progress. Thus, when describing the tragic world of Auschwitz, I have deliberately assumed the calm and sober language of the witness, not the lamenting tones of the victim or the irate voice of someone who seeks revenge. All the same, I would not want my abstaining from explicit judgment to be confused with indiscriminate pardon. No, I have not forgiven any of the culprits, nor am I willing to forgive a single one of them, unless he has shown, with deeds, not words, and not too long afterwards, that he has become conscious of the crimes and errors, and is determined to condemn them, to uproot them from his conscience, form that of others, because an enemy who sees the error of his ways ceases to be an enemy.
Having already faced with fascism, was it difficult to adjust to life in Auschwitz?
I had already lived through 4 years of anti-Semitism and Nazi racial laws. I had escaped to the mountains with others. I already had a preconceived notion of the death camps. As we arrived at Auschwitz, I was taken aback by a relative calm. We had expected something more apocalyptic. The SS men seemed simple police agents.
How did your ethnicity affect you in Auschwitz?
We arrived in a place where we didn't understand the language and the purpose. There were some senseless writings. Nobody explained anything. Or they spoke to us in Yiddish or Polish, and we didn't understand. It was a really alienating experience. It looked like pure folly. It seemed we had abandoned the ability to reason. We didn't reason anymore.